Talk to Jazeera, we speak to Brigadier General Robert Holmes, Deputy Director of Operations for US Central Command. CENTCOM runs all US military activity in the regions where they say they're fighting a war on terror. Iraq, where the 2-month-old security plan is struggling under the weight of daily violence. Afghanistan, now said to be more dangerous for civilians than it was under the Taliban. And the Horn of Africa, where constant instability has led to fears that the region will become a haven for extremists.
General, we've seen an increase in violence in the last few days in Baghdad, one which many people there have said they've not seen the intensity of before. And there have been reprisals. I'm just wondering if in any way you can describe what's going on there, from your point of view, as a success.
When General Petraeus first took command at Multinational Force Iraq and ushered in this new arrangement, this new security plan, he offered as a projection that it would not be surprising to see increased violence, to see violence of a magnitude that would be challenging first the Iraqi people and the security plan. I think this is a violent enemy who seeks acts like this that are horrific to attack the plan, and ultimately it attacks and impacts the people of Iraq.
But my question was, in what way can you view what's happening there now as a success?
Well, I think the success is first in the Iraqi security forces. They take the lead, and as we see the Iraqi people express their confidence. Just in the last few weeks, Gallup poll shows us the confidence that the Iraqi people express in the army. With the police force, it is maturing. There are problems there, and we've seen the government, the Prime Minister, step out to vet 20 to 30% of the Iraqi policemen who are tied to the militias or to sectarian interest groups.
But how confident can they be when they can see their parliament being attacked, when they can see their lawmakers dying, a security zone breached, hundreds of people burnt to pieces and blasted to kingdom come by suicide bombers who seem to be able to operate at free will?
The violence we see now, again, is violence in Baghdad. It's centered there. That is the center of gravity of extreme violent actors and sectarian interest groups, because this is where the center of power, the center of focus comes together, and that's where violent acts are going to be perpetrated against the government and against the Iraqi people. But the success goes back to a government that is not backing down from governing its people, maturing. This is a relatively short endeavor, just in the under 4 years of attempting to build the government.
But I imagine you never thought it would be as long as 4 years.
Well, you know, there are a lot of people who are short-sighted, but taking a nation and building its government, building its security force, takes a while. Institutions are not built in a short order.
But did you ever imagine that it would take 4 years to get to this stage?
I think there were those in our political leadership and military leadership who said that this would not happen quickly.
You're an experienced military man. Are you surprised it's taken 4 years, or was it naive to think that it could have been achieved in anything less?
Well, as a senior military officer looking at the military plan, we've said all along that a military solution by itself would not necessarily give you the conditions of success that the Iraqis are looking for, or the international community is looking for, but that it had to be partnered with overarching diplomatic solutions, political endeavor, economic, commercial solutions, coupled with societal and cultural instruments of power in order to do what's got to be done to build the Iraqi nation.
But without wanting to be boring, General, go back to the same point. You're an experienced military man. Did you think it could be achieved in 4 years, peace and tranquility in Iraq? Or do you think that was always going to be a naive concept?
I would go to, again, General Petraeus, who spent the tour before his assignment now as the commander, looking at doctrine military doctrine for counterinsurgency warfare, and that's what we see going on. For the military, this appeared to be an insurgency, but we were slow maybe to call it that. But now that we see that for what it is, it's not surprising that it takes time to counter and combat those interest groups that uprise in insurgency and fight by irregular, asymmetric means. It takes time.
So that was a mistake, a military mistake, a political mistake, not to realize that there would be such circumstances to face.
I wouldn't call it a mistake. I would
if you
say
didn't realize it was going to happen, and you're a military strategist, what was it?
Well, I would say that you know, it's not a mistake. It's perhaps pursuing a plan, pursuing a solution, and then having it alter course.
By what values, by what criteria will you be able to say the job is done?
Well, the conditions for success will be determined by the Iraqi people as they govern themselves, as they have a free and independent state. That's not something that I could attach a timetable to.
But it could be a never-ending task.
But I could say, you know, one of those conditions for success are the strength and maturity and the capabilities of the Iraqi security forces, the maturity of their police force, and then the maturity of their government. And then after that, to see an economic prosperity that would then lead to peaceful governance of a nation.
But you are assuming in that they're capable, for whatever reasons, of reaching that pass. Well, what if that doesn't happen? What do you do then?
I think in terms of the optimism of the Iraqi people. They've not given up on themselves. They want a free and independent state, and we in the international community would like to assist with them.
But you see, I think a lot of people would like to know what you would actually do if the sectarian violence doesn't end within a matter of months. If you are unable to pass over large parts, if not total control, to the Iraqi authorities, what would you do then? Would you face a never-ending task, an open-ended commitment to stay in that country?
Well, we will stay there till the job is done.
That could be 10
American
years,
military. Again, I can't put a timeline on it.
But you're not saying
it
could never be 10 years.
For the military, the job is to support and enable the Iraqi security force. For the government, it's to look for those elements of political and diplomatic leadership and how to then build a prosperous and commercial nation.
You see, the difficulty, General, is that these people have all the time that they want. Time is on their side, and time is very much against you, politically, and in many senses against you because of the changing mood of the American people. You don't have all of that time, do you?
Well, the military has the time to do what has to be done. Now, if you're again trying to go back to attaching timetables or put pressure on the situation because of time, I would have to go back to the will of first the Iraqi people, and then the commitment of the international community as it supports what the Iraqis want to do for themselves.
The difficulty, if we can turn to another area of conflict, with the fact that the people who live there have as much time as they want, is that when you consider a job to be partially done, as you seem to have done in Afghanistan and moved on to Iraq, it just boils up again, in some ways worse than it was before. Is that the case now in Afghanistan? Because that's what I'm hearing from a lot of people who are there.
We did not partially do the job in Afghanistan. We stayed the NATO. We're still working there. There was never a finish point. Again, a very short period of time has elapsed since the fall of 2001, respectively.
But if I may say so, if the job were completed, the Taliban would have been defeated, and they are, in many people's eyes, stronger now than they were then.
Well, the Taliban went to the hills, and in their mind, as you say, they have time, and they took that time to go to their safe haven, thinking that we would depart, and we haven't. We did not leave.
But you did
the
take a lot of
international
troops out,
community
didn't you?
did
You
not
took
leave.
a lot of troops out of Afghanistan and moved them to Iraq.
We now have the presence of NATO with the international security force there.
It is a more dangerous place in many ways for the civilians living there now. 2006 was the worst year since 2001. for civilian deaths. In what way is the situation better in Afghanistan now for the ordinary people of that country than it was shortly after the fall of the Taliban?
From a military point of view, we see the stability in the region. Yes, there is now an upswing in violence. You've noted that. We anticipated that with the Taliban stating that they would like to now begin to mount an offensive. And our commanders on the ground said, no, we will mount an offensive, and we will make it our offensive and not a Taliban offensive. We've seen that happen.
You've got a lot on your plate internationally, America, at the moment. And top of a lot of people's lists is Iran. How ready are you to go to war with Iran? Militarily prepared?
That assumes a military intent.
Not necessarily. I just would like to know how ready you are if you decided to.
All nations expect their military to be trained and ready to do whatever that nation asks it to do. The American military is like no other, is like all other militaries in that it is trained and ready to do what it would be asked to do. But clearly, our national leadership, our Secretary of Defense is on record for saying that there is no intent for a military engagement with Iran right now.
Have you seen battle plans?
Our plans, as you call them, are to always be trained and ready. Now, I would go back to intent, and it's clearly been stated by our leadership that there's no intent. It would not serve a purpose right now. The diplomatic solutions are in place. They're working. The President has said that he sees hope there with the international diplomacy. So we as military leaders do not want to pursue a military option when we see a diplomatic means as being the best option. So a military engagement would be your last resort for any military leader.
Well, let me ask you a military question.
Mm-hmm.
If you decided to, if the reasons were outlined and it became necessary to attack Iran, how long do you think the regime would last? How long before you said we've won?
I don't have any real feeling or means to be able to give you an answer to that.
Now, how long would the fighting last? What are your best estimates? You've got them written down on paper somewhere, haven't you?
I think that that's again a question that assumes intent, and it also discounts where our national leadership and our international partners have said that they prefer and want to pursue a diplomatic means or a diplomatic end in relationships with Iran. Our military objective in the region is a stable region, to partner with the nations in the region for a community of nations that seek one, peace, and then secondly to look at those again violent extreme actors who come to this region that would like to stand in the way of a stable or peaceful region.
One last question on this particular topic. When would military action be the only option?
A last resort. It's always not with regard to Iran, but in any situation. Military action is always a last resort.